experiencing our church, not just in English, but flavored with some picante. So this is a pleasure for me to offer this moment for us to learn together. And I'm just thrilled to have the presenters that we have with us tonight. Anthony Guillen is a canon in the Episcopal Church. Let me pull up his bio here. So he's been working at a national church since 2005. He is the director of ethnic ministries overall and the missioner for Latino and Hispanic ministry. And he has put together many programs, including some we'll be talking about tonight that we'll be offering as a resource. He's an expert in social media, and I've learned a lot and consulted from him over the years. And so it's just a blessing to have him here. Also on this call is Father Lorenzo Lebrija, who is founding director of something called TriTank. And it is an experiment and innovation lab run out of Virginia Theological Seminary. I think also General, isn't that right, Lorenzo?
That is correct, yes.
And he has a vast experience in development work and in media, and he's a futurist. And also, some of the futurist projects he's working on are to help our church expand our reach and reach across cultural boundaries. And so really thrilled to have Lorenzo here. And then finally, Al Rodriguez, Episcopal priest. He's been an instructor at the Seminary of the Southwest. And I just have to say that his own personal sharing of this approach to Latino ministry, he shared that with me when I was in Indianapolis, and it got stuck in my mind as just what promise it offers. And so it's been just a wonderful friend and encourager to me along the way. So I couldn't be happier to have these three resources nationally come and talk to us about Latino ministry and how we can do that in ways that are a little bit different than what we know here in the Diocese of Oklahoma. We have two fantastic congregations with the worship primarily and exclusively in Spanish, Espiritu Santo in Tulsa, and Santa Maria Virgen here in Oklahoma City, my home parish when I'm not traveling around. These are wonderful congregations, and if you haven't visited them ever, I encourage you to. You will be warmly received. You will find that you're an Episcopalian, you'll know what's going on, even if you don't know the language. And I encourage you to experience the vitality of these two wonderful congregations. But what we're going to learn about tonight is a way where all of us can do outreach to our Latino neighbors, and how there's an approach and a way that we can learn to do that here much more broadly, because we are just scratching the surface of the opportunities here in our diocese. So you don't want to hear from me. That's by way of introduction. The only thing I'll say is we're too big for sort of an open discussion. If you have questions, please post them in the chat and I will refer them to the presenters. So I'm going to mute myself and listen to you all. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Steve. And again, I'm Anthony Guillen, missioner for Latino Hispanic Ministries and director of ethnic ministries, part of the presiding bishop staff. And so pleased to be able to be with you this evening. I want to begin by, I'm going to share with you, as I begin, I would love to know where all of you are from, because I don't know you. I live in Ventura, California, so I would love it if you could, I can see your names, but if you would just say hello and tell us what congregation and city you're in, that would be wonderful. So while you start doing that, I will share my presentation.
I'll start, I guess. I'm Jeff
I'm
Burke.
sorry.
I'm Jeff
I'm sorry.
Burke,
Just
Bartlesville,
put it
Oklahoma.
Just put it in the chat, please. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Okay. So as you probably already know, the current Latino Hispanic, the Latino population in the United States is 62.1 million people. And of that, 6.3 of that 62 million identify themselves as Afro-Latinos, and 1.8 identify themselves as Asian Latinos. There's a lot of intermarriage that is occurring in the United States. And because we are at 62.1 million, that makes the United States the second largest Latino country in the world. I don't know if you knew that or realized that. Mexico is the largest Latino country in the world, and Colombia is the third largest with 50 million people. But we are the second largest Latino country in the world. Now, we're not the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world because 2/3 of us are primarily English speakers. So we're actually the fourth largest Spanish-speaking country in the world, but the second largest Latino population in the world. These are maps from the U.S. Census Bureau that show the growth of the Latino presence in the United States. This map is from 1980. The dark purple areas, well, you can see all those little lines. All those little lines represent, of course, counties. And the dark blue are counties where more than 100,000 Latinos live. And this is 1980, 1990. And you can look at the middle of the map so you can kind of see where Oklahoma is. 2000 and, 2010. So you can see, and I'll go back just so you can see those comparisons again. So there's 1980, 1990, 2000, and 2010. As you can see, there is a expanse of the Latino population, and whereas in 1980, the Latino population was primarily in 4 areas: Southwest, of course, the Florida area, the northeast corner, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, the Chicago area, and the Michigan area. And by 2010, so much of the United States is the Chicago area has expanded tremendously. The Carolinas and Georgia, Florida is almost, if you can see there is very dark, as is the area of Oklahoma. And this graph demonstrates areas where there's been growth in the last where in the last 10 years, where there was currently not many Latinos. And again, if you look in the Oklahoma area, you can see that there's a tremendous increase in that area. Now, the census projects that by 2060, the entire United States is going to grow by about 49%. Of the current U.S. population, the white population over these next 40 years is going to decrease by 10%. The current Latino population will grow by 93%. The Black population will grow by 40%. The American Indian and Alaskan Indian will grow by about 37%, and the Asian population will grow by 100%. So even though the Asian population is going to grow considerably, we're talking about 20 million Asians. So by 2060, there'll be 40 million Asians. The current Latino population is 62 million. And by 2060, it will be about 112 million. So by 2060, and this is, I think, really important, approximately 1 out of 3 Americans will be a Latino. Now, another thing that I think is really important for people to understand about Latinos is that we're not all Spanish speaking. And if there's one thing that you might take away from here, I hope it's that. As you can see by this graph here, Latinos that are 55 and older, 46% of them are bilingual, 18% of them are English dominant, and 35% of them are Spanish dominant. So these are people 55 years and older. A third of them are Spanish dominant. But by the time you look at the younger population, when you get to under 18, only 4% of children under the age of 18 are Spanish dominant. Whereas those under 18, 58% of them are bilingual, and 37% of them are English dominant. So, and so you can see here in these 4 charts how much English Latinos actually speak in this country. And I'd like to share with you a couple of quick little videos.
Hi, I'm Nelson Serrano. I'm living in Fresno, California, originally from Colombia, and I'm a clergy person. I'm a priest in the Diocese of San Joaquin, and I'm serving as the Latino missionary and also as the church planter for the diocese. Now at St. James Cathedral, and also we are close to start another congregation in Taft, California. So you don't need to speak Spanish to start a Latino community. Latinos are just looking for someone who loves them and take care of them. Hi, I'm Nelson.
Now, one of the things about the Latino population that I think is also very important for us to know is that the Latinos are a very young population. The average age of Latinos in the United States is 27 years of age, whereas the white population, the average age is 42 years. And that's one of the reasons that you see that growth and decline. The decline in the white population is primarily because the white population is an aging population, and the rapid growth of Latinos in this country is primarily because of the fact that we're a younger population and we're having children. Here's a graph that just compares the white population with the Latino population. The 3 large purple columns represent 60% of the Latino population, which is between the ages of 5 and 34 years of age, a very young population. The high bars in the gray is a representative of the United States, but also if you were to look at the demographics of most of our Episcopal churches, it would be very similar to what you see there in terms of the gray bars, which begin at 45 years of age and go down. And a couple of other quick videos.
My name is Darling Tovar, and I've been part of the Episcopal Church for the last 3 years. The reason I have stayed at this church is because I was welcomed with open arms in every aspect of what welcoming means. I was invited to help set up the mobile church that I was a part of. I was invited to help grow the church. I was invited to be a lector, to do chalice, to do the altar guild, and now I'm part of the vestry. And the community has become a family for me. And this family means that I am supported no matter what, that I have anybody to turn to whenever I'm going through any situation in my life in which I need help. And the Episcopal Church has brought this all to me. It's taught me what the meaning of family truly is. It's taught me who God really is. And I've gotten to know who Jesus Christ is through every single member of the community at the parish at which I attend.
My my name is Melanie Vaisaga, and I am from the Southeast Florida Episcopal Church, St. Bernard de Clairvaux. I was originally Catholic, and then my mom was invited to the Episcopal Church in downtown. And what I just loved, and I've never really knew God before that. I knew about him, but I didn't really know him personally. And I think through the music that the church had, and the love and the friendliness that they showed me was extremely important. And and also the youth group was extremely active. And so that actually made it a lot fun, made church a lot more fun than it was back when I was younger. So yeah, that's what I love the most. And also that the reverend and the pastors were more accessible. I was able to, they reached out to me, they welcomed me, so they weren't this like super holy person you couldn't communicate with. They're actually, just people that are part of the community, and so they always made me feel welcome. And I love the church that it's so welcoming to all different types of people.
So I'm looking for there we go. So this is just a very quick introduction to the demographics in the Episcopal Church. And I hope that you learned a little something. Perhaps it's confirmed something that you already knew. And I wanted you to hear from these Latino young adults who are active, who have come into the Episcopal Church because they were invited. The two young women that you heard from, one of the things that they would say to you is that you don't need to speak Spanish to invite them to church. They both attend. They both attend bilingual congregations, so this is just kind of a little teaser. One of the things that I mentioned to Ken and Steve is that we have a program in the Office of Latino Hispanic Ministry called New Camino. New Camino is an introduction to Latino Hispanic ministry, and it is a 2-day event, and we would like to offer New Camino to the Diocese of Oklahoma. We'll bring a small team of folks in that will share, lots of information over 2 days. You'll hear stories. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions and to go a lot deeper than this little introduction that we've just presented today. So I look forward to coming back to being with all of you, and all we have to do is set a date. So with that, I would like to pass it over to my friend Al Rodriguez.
I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, do you see my first slide that says calibrating our picture of Latino ministry?
Yes, we can, Al.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Steve, for making this possible. I don't know if the people who are participating are aware that this is a first, actually, in the country, that Steve has facilitated this possibility of entering into discussion of Latino ministry beyond what we consider traditional Latino ministry, which is primarily in Spanish. And what we're doing this evening is we're trying to recalibrate our picture of what we think or know about Latino ministry. And so what you're going to be hearing today, let me see here. Just a second. Here we go. All right. What you'll be hearing today is understanding Latino acculturation dynamics and language preferences. And this is some of the things that Anthony has gone into. I'm going to be giving you a more of a focus on what I call the later generation Latinos that are literally in many of your backyards in where you are as a congregation. And later on, Lorenzo Lebrija is going to bring you a new demographic tool analysis for analyzing your adjacent zip codes to determine what kind of Latinos you've got. And then he's going to also be talking about a new liturgical approach to reaching English-speaking Latinos. So in a way, there are many doors on how to get involved in evangelizing and pastoring Latinos. We've got the traditional existing ministry, which is the Spanish language ministry. And this is primarily a ministry that is aimed at the immigrant Spanish-speaking Latinos. This is what I call the bread and butter Latino ministry that we have been doing for the last 50 years or so. And we've gotten pretty good results out of this missionary efforts. But these are all practically Spanish-speaking Latinos. Then we got a bilingual worship that is beginning to crop up. Even some of the Anglo congregations are doing it, but some of the mature Latino congregations that are 30 years plus in their life cycle, now they're beginning to experiment with bilingual worship, particularly because of the pressure and the requests from the children, the youth, and the young adults of their congregation to integrate more English into their service. And then there's this, the one on the right is where we have evangelism partners with English-speaking Latinos and what we normally describe as Anglo congregations. So what I'm going to be concentrating on is going to be the portion around this dotted line here, the boxes that have to do with English-speaking Latinos, and seeing what the potential that we've got in this regard. So that we're kind of on the same page, I think it's necessary to define what the generations are, the Latino generations. You've got the first generation, which are the migrant immigrants, where all family members are born outside of the US. Then we have the 1.5 generation, which is a relatively new addition to these generational spectrum. And these are the foreign-born children that are brought to the US at a very early age. We're beginning to know them as DACA, dreamers, and so forth. But these are kids who were brought in at a very early age. They have been socialized, educated, and enculturated into the US. And they are bilingual, but very much English prone in terms of their interaction with each other. And then we have the second generation, and this is the US born Latino with at least one foreign born parent and one foreign born grandparent. The third generation, the US born Latino has two US born parents and at least one foreign born grandparent. From the fourth generation on, everybody is born in the States. So keep these generations in mind. And what, let me say that our current existing traditional Latino ministry is pretty much focused on the first generation and the 1.5 generation. And what I'm going to be talking to you about is a new paradigm, a new parallel paradigm that would involve the second, third, and fourth generation Latinos. Now, the US Latino world is complex. It's multicultural, multilingual, multi-generational, definitely, and multiracial. And so what we are confronting now in the Latino ministry is the fact that we have an acculturation reality that we can't deny. We can't go back. It is something that is relentless. The acculturation of Latinos is happening, and it's happening pretty fast, to the point that 2/3 of the Latinos in the country are English bilingual or English dominant. And here, just I won't go through this again. This is basically the various generations as you go up the ladder on the generation ladder. The question that we're going to ponder, and we're going to ponder at the end, who's going to take the lead in reaching these English-speaking or English-prone Latinos? Because the traditional Latino congregations were not established to really create an outreach, an evangelistic outreach to the Latinos who are English speaking, what I call the at-large Latinos, who are not part of the Latino congregations. You do have Latino congregations that have second and even third generation kids, but they're born into the congregation. And so what we're concerned about is what is happening, who is doing the evangelizing to these English dominant or English prone Latinos that nobody is paying attention to, neither the Latino congregations per se, or the Anglo congregations for the most part. So, we really now have the reality of the Latino landscape. Basically, it says 4 cultural worlds, and I'll explain the 4th one. We have the first generation, which is the fundamental base for our ministry, Latino ministry. We've got the 1.5, and we've got then the acculturate and so forth. Let me explain that among the U.S. born Latinos, these are Latinos, many of whom have been here for decades. You have the Mexican Americans that are in the Southwest, Texas, California, Oklahoma, the Midwest, and so forth. And then you've got the Puerto Ricans, the Dominicans, and the Cuban Latinos. These are the historically settled Latinos who have been in the country in concentration from the mid 1800s to and then the early 1900s, with all the thing that happened with the Spanish-American War that brought a lot of the Caribbean Latinos into the States. So you've got Latinos that are down here in we would call these the new Latinos, because they've been here less than 50 years in the current diaspora, particularly happening in the 70s onwards. Whereas compared to the U.S. born Latino, many of whom have been here for decades, I've said. So virtually untouched field, evangelistic field, is this portion of the Latino world. Okay. The fourth reality of the landscape that is not shown there are the transitional Latino congregations who are beginning to feel the pinch from their youth and their children to have more English. And these are transitional Latino congregations. Okay, I'm gonna skip through these things because I've already mentioned to you. Why the traditional Latino ministry has to survive and grow. For the most part, we desperately need the traditional Spanish-speaking Latino ministry to exist, because the immigration will continue, even though the immigration has lessened considerably from the 2001 era onwards. The immigration has lessened and now has been overtaken by the native-born Latinos, who are now the main driver of the population growth for the Latino population. But the Latino ministry really is driven by the need to address the spiritual, religious, cultural, and linguistic needs of the Latino brothers and sisters that are just coming into the country. And what they're seeking is a safe sanctuary. And this is what we're providing them, a place where they can be who they are, and they can be culturally and worship in the language of the heart. And so we provide actually comfortable safe havens for the Latinos. But one thing very important to understand is that the Latino church is following the patterns of the earlier American experience of the ethnic churches, the Germans, the Czechs, the Scandinavians, Polish, Italian, and so forth, that decreased and went actually out of business, so to speak, because of the acculturation dynamics of the white immigrants who were more easily assimilated versus the Latino ethnic church, which is going to take a long time to really assimilate as did the immigrant. Now, for the foreseeable future, therefore, we still need pastors with a cultural and language competency to minister to the Spanish-speaking, the first generation Latinos, and what we call the Latino ethnic church. And so this is the existing paradigm. But what is necessary is that we have to understand that the traditional Latino ministry was never expected to reach out to the other English-speaking Latinos other than those that speak Spanish. And that is the reality of our situation. Now, let me post to you what we call the Latinx or the Latine ministry dilemma. Well, you've got here the USS Episcopalia right here. It is the US Episcopalia is sailing around this big iceberg. And what is seen is the top 1/3 of the iceberg, which represents the 1/3 of the Latino population, or roughly 21 million. These are 2020 figures, and this population of the foreign-born Latinos are now about 22 million. But this is what the Episcopal Church mostly sees and who they minister to. And so what we got here is that the church now is pretty much focusing almost exclusively on the Spanish-speaking Latinos. And let me say one thing very clearly, and it's a caveat. We're not denigrating or speaking against the traditional Latino ministry, because it is vitally necessary. It is part of who we are as the Episcopal Church. And it has to be supported. It's got to be maintained, and we will have it around for several generations, good generations to come. However, we have a dilemma in the sense that we have an invisibility problem. We have an invisibility problem of the native-born Latinos, who are roughly now 40 million, which represent 2/3 of the Latino population. In other words, 2 out of 3 Latinos in the country are native-born. And so we've got a problem in that neither the Latino congregations or the Anglo congregations, for the most part, are paying attention to these native-born, English-prone Latinos. This is what I'd call a no man's land from an evangelistic standpoint. And let me just end with this portion here. Actually, 2 more slides. This is just kind of gives you an idea of the acculturation landscape. You go from the recently arrived Latinos who have been in the States for less than 7 years. Then you move up to the established families, those who have been here 20, 25 years. These are very much still very Spanish speaking, although these are more bilingual, functionally bilingual. And then you got the 1.5 generation, the dreamers and so forth. And then you slide now into the native born, the 2nd generation, and then you get into the 3rd and 4th generation Latinos. So these are the English dominant, culturally, socially, economically mobile Latinos, many of who are now mainstreaming into the just American society. These, in effect, what I'm saying to you is that we've got um, these generations that are waiting to be evangelized, but we're concentrating primarily over here where this is just going, begging to be approached from an evangelistic standpoint. In effect, what we have to do is that we have to recognize that we should be employing the strategy of evangelization niches, so that we can address all of the Latinos, whether they're Spanish speaking or English speaking, on the right side of this pie chart. And so what we need is pastors who can pastor anywhere from purely in Spanish all the way those who can minister to Latinos in English. And this is basically the main message that we're bringing to you, that now we have, in essence, an emerging paradigm that I'm calling transgenerational or transcultural evangelism, which is aimed at the English-speaking Latinos. And so in the future, what we're going to have is the big picture, an emerging new paradigm of transcultural evangelism, which is really at the very beginning of a long-term process. It's in its infancy, really, but it is urgently needed. And so what we're going to have is a parallel pair of Latino ministries. The one that is on the left side, the traditional Latino existing ministry, which is aimed at the Spanish speaking, and then the evangelization to the long-term or the later generation Latinos that are in the country, that are transcultural and that include the multi-generations and English dominant. I'm going to stop here because I would like our good friend Lorenzo Labrija to bring to you his notion of how Anglo congregations can really get involved with English-speaking Latinos.
Before we transfer, we've got a couple questions.
Okay.
Anna, you have your hand raised. Is there something you wanted to say? Did you not mean to raise your hand?
Is that Anita, you say?
Yes.
Menjivar. Mhm.
All right. You can, I'll lower your hand, but you can put something in the chat if you have a question. Let's see, we had a question from Father John Tolles from St. Matthew's in Enid. My understanding is that Latino Hispanic individuals are primarily Roman Catholic. Would they choose to participate in an English-speaking Episcopal Church? Are they not a member of another church? And then Father Tim Bear said, lots are Pentecostals too. Al, would you like to respond?
Yes. Nowadays, the normal percentages that are used is that 60% of the Latinos are either practicing or sometimes Catholics, Roman Catholics. 15 to 20% are evangelicals. The mainline churches only take about roughly 9% altogether. We, the Episcopal Church, we only have about 1.2% that are Latino. So you got the great majority, the 60% or so, Roman Catholics. The other major group are the evangelicals. But you've got a lot of the increasing category that are called the nuns, N-O-N-E-S. And the nuns really are, many of them are disaffected Roman Catholics. Many of them are disaffected Pentecostals or evangelicals because they went from one extreme to the other, and now they're searching for a middle ground. And this is where we are. And so we definitely have a place for many of these Latinos that have not found their home in the denominations where they grew up in.
And if I may add, the Roman Catholic Church loses about 1 million Latinos a year in the United States alone. Um, many Latinos are seeking a spiritual home. And when they find us, one of the things that they say to us is that this was the church they were looking for, except they didn't know it existed or they didn't know its name. So we have a lot to offer. Just because many of them are nominally Roman Catholic by baptism does not mean that that they are actually churchgoers.
Steve, any other questions on the chat?
Not yet.
Okay, I do want to emphasize my last point on this slide that you're seeing here, and that is that it really is going to fall on the Anglo congregations, those who are called to some form of multicultural worship. That doesn't include all of the Episcopal congregations. We know that for a fact. But for those Anglo congregations who want to look at the future, and the future is multiculturalism, whether we like to admit that or not. The future of the churches, the Christianity in the United States is multicultural. And so it is going to be falling on the Anglo congregations on the responsibility, and I say responsibility, is not the burden, because it's not a burden, but it is a responsibility of seeing that we are at least attempting to evangelize this vast number of English-speaking native-born Latinos that are completely outside of our evangelistic radar screen, just totally. And so it's going to be the English congregations, the Anglo congregations, who are going to have to step up to the plate. And why, unfortunately, our existing Latino congregations, for the most part, are not equipped to do that, simply because many times there's a vast cultural difference between the second, third generation Latinos who are English speaking. They're too gringoized for the traditional Latino congregations. And so there's a tremendous gap. And so again, it is the Anglo congregations who are going to have to step up to the plate. But it is a tremendous plate. Let me just say this, and I'll finish with this. If you took the native-born Latinos in the country, in the US, and made them into a country, they would be the fourth largest country in the world, next to Mexico, Colombia, and Argentina. These are the native-born Latinos, most of whom are English dominant or bilingual. The fourth largest country in Latin America and the Caribbean. And so the question is obvious: why would such a thing exist? Why are we not paying attention?
And I think I'll take it over now.
Please,
Right, Al?
thank you, Lorenzo. Yes.
Excellent. Alan, if maybe you can stop sharing your screen.
Sure, yes.
So that's all good. So, hey, everyone. I think, we're making our case here for you this evening, and that it doesn't have to be as something that's difficult for you to follow. So what I want to talk a little bit, so my name is Reverend Lorenzo Lebrija. I direct TriTank, the Experimental Laboratory for Church Growth and Innovation. And we're always out there trying to think of the future, be the future of the church, and how that can look. And I want to tell you, it's a quick little story that I have. I was driving in my car. The wind was in my hair and all that. And I was listening to Spanish radio. And all of a sudden, a commercial for Ford comes on. And I'm like, why is this commercial for Ford in English on Spanish radio? I'm like, I'm pretty sure that Ford's a large company. They can probably afford a Spanish announcer. This is really weird, right? So it makes you wonder, like, why would they do this? And of course, you realize that it's a multinational $1 billion corporation and advertising. They know what they're doing. So I began investigating, like, why are they doing their ads in Spanish? And I'm sorry, in English, when the music is in Spanish, when the programming is in Spanish. Well, as it turns out, they discovered something that's amazing, is that it turns out that Latinos can retain information better as all the data that has just been given to you by Al and by Anthony, that the later generation Latinos, i.e. the consumers for the corporations, tend to retain their information better when they receive it in English. And I'm like, well, now you're talking. Tell me more about this thing. And as it turns out, all that it is that they're saying, we want to be with you if you're in our culture. And I was like, okay, business is already here. Why don't we find out what they know? And this is what we at TriTech, we're like, okay, we need to find a way that we can really dive into this data. So I want to show you just two little shares of my screen here. The first one is what you've been hearing tonight. I want to sort of give you the national spotlight, which is this. Latinos basically break down into 5 categories, if you think of it as a sort of spectrum. On the left over here, you have the HA1s, which are totally, they're fully Latino, but are monolingual in English. That's right, monolingual. They only speak one language. It happens to be English. The HA5s are over on this side. These are the monolinguals in Spanish. So these are the ones generally first generations that you've heard us talking about tonight. And the rest of the spectrum fills in here. So the HA2s are monolingual. They're not monolingual, they're bilingual, but they prefer English by a lot. This would be like probably me. I spend most of my time in this, although I can also be an HA3, which is I'm fully bilingual and I can go back and forth in either language. I put myself more over here because I dream in English. And I think that tells me something, that most of my thinking now is in English. And then over here is the HA4s. These are the ones that are bilingual and prefer Spanish. My mom's over here. She's an HA4. But if you probably have noticed the percentages, and these are the national percentages, is that we end up with having here is 72% of the country is either monolingual in English or prefers to get, or are bilingual, but they don't mind it either being fully in English or prefer to receive their information in English. Whereas only, when it comes to it, only 28% of the population, of the Latino population, is either monolingual in Spanish, or there's the fact that they're fully bilingual, but they prefer Spanish a little bit, i.e. my mom, right? So she watches Spanish television, she dreams in Spanish. So these sorts of things. So when we think about, we call this Latino ministry, it might not be what you think, is that most of the time we give ourselves this like full on stops, like, I can't do Latino ministry because I don't speak Spanish. I am here to give you the good news. Neither do they. They don't speak Spanish either. They prefer to receive their information in English. And so this is an opportunity for us to meet them where they are. So Canon Steve was kind enough to send me the zip codes of some of you who will be here tonight. And we're going to share with all of you in a little bit. We don't want to do it right now. But what I want to do is I want to share with you the reports that we pulled for each one of you. Because you might be like, okay, that's the national, Lorenzo. What's it like around my church? Because I have a feeling that my people might be a little bit different. So for those of you who are here from St. John's or St. David's, who are the zip code 73112, this is the report for your zip code, 73112 in Oklahoma City. And I just want to go through the report so you can understand what the report sort of says, right? So we're looking at this area. The analysis area code is A, which tells us that this is basically what we're looking at, this area, 73112. Now, if you all get more and more interested in this, we all know that we pull from different zip codes. It's generally not just one zip code that we're pulling from. So people will travel up to 15 minutes is what we sort of know. So once you're getting closer to doing something more legit, more like I'm in on this, I see where you guys are going, we can pull a report that has more for you. But in this zip code, there's 31,468 people within it says 3 here, but it's only 1 that we pulled here. That's an error on my part. The zip code represents 11.74% of the DMA, the designated market area. And the data point, there were 6,152 Latinos of those 31,000. So what you can see here is that 15%, right? They make up 15% of the DMA are the Latinos. And what's awesome about this, by the way, the index means I don't know if you're familiar with indexes, if you're above the index, if you're above 100%, that means you're more likely to. Or if you're below the index, you're less likely to. So if you had a 100 right here on where it says index, that means that if you pulled a random person off the street from this zip code, you have about a 50-50 chance that you're going to pull someone who is a Latino or an Anglo. What this is saying is that you have a greater chance right now that you're going to pull. You're indexing well, that you're actually going to bump into a Latino within the base count here of the 6,100. But this is the best part down here. Remember, I just showed you the part that talks the HA1s to the HA5s. So here's a whole from monolingual in English to monolingual in Spanish at HA5. For this zip code 73112, of the 6,152 Latinos, this is how they break down into HA1s, HA2s, HA3s, HA4s. Notice something? There are no HA5s. There are no monolingual Spanish speakers in this zip code in Oklahoma City. So if you're stopping from doing Latino ministry because you don't speak Spanish, again, good news, neither do they. So what you want to do is look at down here, and here's how it compares to the national averages. And in fact, I'm going to do here so I can actually annotate and actually show you the spotlight. So spotlight here. Pew. All right. So here we have, the HA1s. What you want to see here are HA1s, HA2s, HA3s. Those are the important ones. Here's sort of the dividing line. You want to go Spanish if you're going more this way, if the numbers are higher. So you can see, though, that out of the 6,152, 4,441 can do it in English and prefer it in English. So that means that 72% of this area, it turns out, by the way, you have a much greater HA1 percentage than the national average, almost by 10 percentage points. You're pretty good on the HA2s. You're pretty much with the national average, and you're a little bit lower on the HA3s. That's where you ended up with more people that speak monolingual English than they do just fully bilingual. So what this tells us, and you'll see that again, you'll see these reports for each one of your congregations. What hopefully this is telling us and showing us is that, oh my goodness, we can do this. Now, here's the key, because somebody else asked it, right? Why are they all RCs already, or don't they want to sort of just go to that? Because I've actually had people ask me, it's like, well, we already do a service in English, so why aren't they already coming? Great question, hypothetical person that's not here right now. I'm glad you asked that question. The reason why that is because we need to be in culture. I studied with David Hurd, who put together the hymnal of 1982. It was my lowest grade in seminary. They are not going to go if you're only playing the organ. I once heard the song Alabaré, which is a really fast Latino song, played on the organ, and I was like, that sounds very familiar. But what? And then I realized what it was. I was like, oh my God, they are butchering that song like there was no tomorrow. So what you need to think about is, how are they ecclesiastically? And this is where I call is you have to be ecclesiastically flexible. You have to be willing to look at them and say, well, you know what's important to them? First communion. We know that you can get communion immediately after you're baptized, but marking that moment matters to them. So why wouldn't we mark it alongside with them? In fact, maybe that's something we want to take on and do more regularly. Second of all, quinceañeras are very important to them. The saints, depending on where they're from, right? And the report, by the way, we can also tell you which part of Latin America they're sort of coming from. Because if they're more Cubans, then you probably want to talk about La Caridad del Cobre and talk about Mary and that aspect of Mary, more than if they're Mexican, if they're of that descent, then they're going to talk to you about La Virgen de Guadalupe, and December 12th is going to be very important. And that's what I mean by ecclesiastical flexibility. In no way am I saying, take the prayer book and throw it out. No. I am saying, let us add some things that are really important to them to be able to do this. So you don't have to do it bilingually. You just have to be in culture, not in language. Now, we are at TriTech have developed a program called La Misa in English, which means the Mass in English. You know how creative we are with naming. And what we're actually doing is we're trying it out in 4 congregations right now, and we're willing to walk alongside with you if you want to try it out, to develop in culture, because the in culture liturgical language will look and feel different depending on your context. So we want to create many different sort of examples of it so that you can be like, oh, this looks like it would be good for our people. And you can take your people, talk to them and be like, does this sound right? And they'll tell you, oh, what if we change this over here? You get them involved in it as well. It's all about getting people involved in the process of determining their own. But again, if you're willing to be ecclesiastically flexible, you can reach out to your Latino neighbors, and they are willing. As I wrote in the comment aren't they all sort of more former Roman Catholics? I firmly believe, I don't yet have data on this, but I firmly believe that our theology is much closer to their lived reality, as Anthony was saying, from what we just hear from anecdotal evidence. It's much closer to their reality. And I've done Latino ministry, and I know what it's like when a woman is coming up to get communion and she can't get it because she feels she can't get it because she's been divorced, and that they have that. And I'm like, no, you're still welcome here. So anyways, I know I'm going to end it there. I'm going to send it back to Steve because I know we're running short on time, but I just wanted to share that we have that tool. All of you will have access to your reports based on your zip code. We can certainly do more. And if you want to join us on the on the La Misa in English, we can certainly talk about that as well. But Steve, take it away.
I would just say that my experience of that acculturated way of doing ministry is enriching for everybody. When we have to translate what we love and not into another language, but into another cultural expression, we're enriched by the sort of mutual giving that happens between the two. Anthony, Al, is there anything else you want to add before I open it up for questions?
That's an invitation for us to talk. Yeah, there's so many things. I mean, I was just I get so engaged when I listen to Al and to Lorenzo. I learned so much from both of them. And, and there's so many things that I wanted to, more than anything, is just to kind of highlight some of the things that they've already said. But, the ecclesiastical liturgical culture is just such an important aspect of this ministry. Hospitality. We are, and you, Steve, said this just so well a few minutes ago. We are enriched. Our American Episcopal expression is so different from our English culture that we came from. When I've visited England, there's things that are familiar and things that I love, but it's like, I'm so thankful we're the Episcopal Church because we're not Anglicans in that sense. We're really different because we're our own culture. And now we're experiencing a shift in the church as we embrace other cultures, and not just Latino culture, but indigenous culture and Asian American culture and the Black culture. When we bring all that in, we're such a richer church. So it gets me really excited. Yeah, obviously it's also intimidating. It's a challenge. It means we have to grow. It means we have to learn to be flexible. It means that we have to admit that we don't know everything. But I think the end result is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Steve, do you mind if I share just one slide? Are you
Yes,
muted?
Please do. Yes.
Okay, good. Let me okay, I'm going to can you see this slide here all
Yes.
completely?
Yes.
Okay. And let me drop my gallery out of the way. Okay. I think it would be interesting for people to know that if you're going to be considering ministry to English-prone Latinos, and that's not an assumption or a given, but if you would be directed in that direction because that's where your heart is, or that's where you think that your resources can be best be put to use, there are three different evangelistic strategies to explore. One is what I call the attraction ministry approach. And the question is, what do we have to do to attract the targeted ethnic racial group? In this case, would be the English-speaking Latinos. And so what this is very kind of rifle shot question. What do we have to do in order to attract them to our church? The other approach is what I call the market analysis approach, and that is the question, what does our targeted ethnic racial group, in this case, the later generation Latinos, need from our Anglican Episcopal expression of Christianity and richness of our liturgy? And so what this is, you're analyzing what they need of what we've got. That's the second. The third one is what I call the transcultural evangelistic model, which is the emerging paradigm. And this is based on a concept of a co-evangelization exchange, where both Anglo congregation and prospective Latino congregants bring their set of value-added gifts of liturgy, music, religiosity, vibrancy of worship, and so forth. And its fundamental strategy has a goal of relationship building and discovery of gifts. I personally gravitate to this last model because it is a partnered evangelistic endeavor. It is not a top-down power situation of the dominant group with the Latinos, but it is meeting them where they are, discovering and asking them, or saying, I want to enhance my worship and music and so forth. What can you add to what we've got? And then you can say to them, we've got a universal sense of Catholicity that I think you might be interested in knowing about. And we've got a reform way of being church. And so this is what we want to talk to you about. So in effect, it's people to come to the table, to evangelistic table, bringing in their respective gifts on a one-to-one, peer-to-peer type of relationship. And that really points to the fact that you've got to really establish relationships in doing this, and in the process, discovery of gifts from both sides. I just wanted to show this because I think it's important to understand that there are several ways that we can do this.
I really like that approach, Al. That is some of the other work that we're going to be doing about faith validation training. It's exactly that kind of approach, the being with rather than being for others. And so I look forward to working with that approach in this group. We have a couple good questions. Anna asked a question, Anthony has already responded. And let me get, where can I find my cursor? There it is. Asking, in the Diocese of Oklahoma, we don't have bilingual programs yet. And how to connect to the diocese, to the National Latino Ministry? What bilingual resources do we have from the National Latino Ministry? And Anthony has responded directly. I just want to say to Anna that we know that we need to be working on that here in the Diocese of Oklahoma and providing more bilingual resources. We're looking at our communications that way. The Congregational Vitality Assessment is now available in Spanish, and we'll be offering that for Santa Maria and Espiritu Santo. So happy about that. So I know Anthony's responded to that question. So next question.
I would love to respond to Omar's question.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we don't really encourage people to establish a Latino congregation nested inside of a Anglo congregation. Our vision for the Episcopal Church is that the Episcopal Church be the multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilingual church that our country is. And so what we encourage is that existing Anglo congregations welcome Latinos, whether they're English speakers or Spanish speakers, into the parish. If a church is All Saints and they reach out to Latinos, even if they're Spanish speaking, they welcome them to All Saints, not to a separate congregation, just to perhaps a separate, we may need to invite them to a separate worshiping time. But our existing Anglo congregations, there's hardly a congregation that doesn't have two cultural services that we often refer to as the 8 o'clock and the 10 o'clock. They're both members of All Saints. They just happen to worship at different times with a slightly different culture. And so by adding a worshiping a service that worships at another time in another language is just a component of the whole, but not separate. We have found that our experience has taught us that when we create a separate church within a church, invariably there are issues that arise, jealousy, fight for space, discord, and that's not the body of Christ. So we encourage congregations to consider inviting Latinos or whoever their neighbors happen to be. It could be in Oklahoma that your neighbors are actually indigenous, but to invite the people in our community into our fellowship, and not to think of hosting a congregation, but rather welcoming other people into our current community, and then learn how we live together as the family. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. I would like to hear your responses to our priest in All Saints McAllister. Janie Cock is asking, how do we do this without appropriating culture? How do we reach out culturally appropriately without taking over and using another cultural expression?
If we're inviting Latinos, we invite them to help us learn how to do that. It's but there's I think we ask questions, we get people involved, we don't make assumptions. I think those are just some general rules, and I know that there's some people that have concerns about misappropriating somebody else's culture. I think if we do it for our sake, I think it's different than when we do it for us, for the community. And when we do it for the community, we're not misappropriating, especially if we invite others to be a part of it. I think, to me, that's the key, is to not just make the assumptions, to just do something out of a book, but to actually engage people. And when we do that, what we find is that there are partners out there. And so, again, our experience just becomes that much more richer. I
want to add a little bit.
Have something to.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, Al, do you have something? Then I'll add after you.
No, go ahead. All right,
I wanted to add a little bit. So part of what we've done for the Tri-Tank experiment of La Misa in English is this thing called cultural intelligence. And it's a 2-hour training that we put together that basically talks about 4 things. And I think hopefully this goes to Janie's question. And the 4 parts of cultural intelligence are the drive, your level of interest, your persistence. So you sort of have to know why you're doing this, right? Theoretically, for us, it is to spread the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then you also have to understand is the second part of cultural intelligence is the cultural intelligence knowledge. In other words, your understanding about how the cultures are similar and different. Then the third part is cultural intelligence action, which talks about your ability to adapt when relating to multicultural situations. So if you notice in this, and then the fourth is cultural intelligence strategy, your awareness and being able to plan for this. All of that is made so that you're not appropriating. And in my comment, it may have seemed very short, but it was really about how do we let them lead this interaction? If you're going to come and show up and pretend like I know what's right, and I'm going to tell you exactly how it's done, then it's not going to work as well as you want it to. However, if you come from it with both the ecclesiastical flexibility that I spoke about, and also some just humility and recognizing that they have a lot to add to our table. And I'll finish with this. This is the best example I ever heard of how we do this. And it stopped me from using the "we're making room at the table" example for people. It's like, oh, we're making room at the table, which seems reasonable. The only problem with that, making room at the table, is like, I've now sort of given up some of it. So you now owe me, because I gave up room at the table for you to sit with me. So you owe me now. Rather, the alternative to that is to think of Jesus as the carpenter that he was. And to think that Jesus would take the table, would break it all down and rebuild it so that everybody has a place at the table. It's not that I'm giving you or letting you be at the table. When we are inviting and working with a different culture, we need to have that mindset that says, I want to learn from you. This is important to us, and that you have a lot to offer by coming to our church. So you're actually doing us a favor rather than we're doing you a favor by letting you be here with us.
I would like to invite Marianne Kaufman, who is in our diocese, a deacon, who actually does this kind of community outreach in the healthcare field, to share her experience.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I am a Latina, 100% Peruvian, bicultural, bilingual, and professionally, I work in the area of health and public health. And I'm a genetic counselor and promoting genetic services to the Spanish-speaking community. Everything you have said confirms that what we've been doing in public health for the last 10 years. The idea of humility, the idea of partnership, of collaboration, of learning from each other. Mm-hmm. It's not me just meeting where they are. They also have to meet where we are. Mm-hmm. So it is not exactly like you all said about us letting them in. It's about them letting us in. It's just as powerful. Mm-hmm. So it's something I've learned professionally, that when we set up a project for the Spanish-speaking community or the Latino community, we form a new group of partnerships within the community of professionals who work in health, of the communities, of the families, of the communities out there that we're trying to serve. And it is never, and they are part of the entire decision process. As a Latina, I don't dare to represent all Latinas. I don't dare to represent the community around our Church of St. David's. I don't know. I have to walk into that community, learn and talk and invite, and I hope they invite me into their community. So it's a very different way of thinking. And I've been doing this in the production of educational tools for Spanish-speaking Latinos, very aware that the majority are not Spanish-speaking. In fact, the videos on clinical genetics that we produce is all in Spanish, and we're switching them back to English. The countries that are using our videos are the countries in Central America, not as much the countries in the USA, because the majority do not speak Spanish. So I think it's just a frame shift on our part, of bowing our heads and just moving into the community with grace and asking and learning. I'm not even assuming I need Spanish speaking tools, right? I just want to learn the culture, that culture specifically, not base it on my Latina culture, but what the culture, the neighborhood that surrounds us. But the second thing I want to mention, being a bicultural Latina woman, is that youth now, and I think someone mentioned that, are seeking for diversity. So it doesn't have to be necessarily Latina, Marshallese, whatever. They are looking for diversity in a church. And my daughters personally, when they walk into a church that is not diverse, and it doesn't matter if it's Latino necessarily, they are not interested. They're growing in a more diverse community, including with a large Latino community. So I think we have to keep that in mind for our youth and our young adults, is they simply want diversity. They want multiculturalism because they're more in tune with it because they grew up more with it than we did in this country. So I welcome with my full heart your wonderful presentation. It affirms me, and it affirms, and it's humbling to see that the church is moving that way. So thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. I've already learned so much from you with your public health outreach. So you're a treasure, and I appreciate your wisdom as we go forward. Father John has a question really about the how, which we're going to be talking about in a moment for next step. So Father John, I hope you don't mind if I leave that and see whether we address that next. Omar had a comment about teología in conjunto, and it basically means we all theologize together, not exclusive to Latinos, but it's something born from Latinos theologizing in the United States. That's a great comment. Omar, do you want to add anything else? One of our seminarians?
Yeah, just also it's really nice to be with Father Yan and Lorenzo and El, but yeah, that there's just this beautiful, rich theology that happens in these contexts, and I, being one of the demographics, many of the demographics described, I find it just very enriching, and having been in seminary for 3 years and really being in a context that is nothing like I grew up in, this really warms my heart, and there's just this beautiful, rich, wonderful theology that happens in Latino ministry that I draw upon many, many times, and it's beautiful. And it's really this idea that we're theologizing together, and it's theology in a way sort of in the margins, and it's not necessarily something that you would hear in seminary, but it's equally beautiful. It's very enriching, and I just find it to be fundamental to who I am and how I view Christ in the world.
Mhm.
Thank you, Omar.
Steve,
Yes.
this is Al. Just wanted to add to the conversation. For young LGLs, the later generation Latinos, the obvious resting place is not necessarily a Latino congregation, but a multicultural congregation. They live multiculturally, they marry multiculturally, they work multiculturally, and many of them do not want to be pigeonholed, very honestly, relegated into an immigrant setting, because they want that's what they're trying to get away from in many respects, because their natural world is multicultural. And so I think that the more that we can have that come across to our Anglo congregations who are debating what kind of Latino ministry to do, the main thing to do is to first ask yourself the question, what type of Latinos do you have in front of you? You almost have to put on a hat like a community organizer, and you have to dissect the Latino community using, for example, the tools that Lorenzo has brought us, which, by the way, is one of the most vanguard things that we've got in place right now. Nobody else has this way to dissect into the various generations and the language preferences and so forth. Just want to underline that point, that multiculturalism is really the next step, the next evolution beyond Latino ministry, and because that's mostly where we are. The last point I want to make is that the concept of transcultural means learning from each other, but with the core value that we're both going to be having to adapt. We're going to have to change. Both of us are going to change in some way or another. The ones who are in concert and partnership with us, we're going to change. And very honestly, if you've got a congregation that is fearful of change, then this is not the route that you want to go, because in effect, transcultural evangelism means that we're going to have to be adaptive to what and who our partner is altogether.
One member of a former congregation told me that at this congregation, nobody gets to be completely comfortable. We're all pulled and we all shift and we all grow. Anna makes a good comment. When there are some challenges with both Latino and Anglo ministries together. One is positive in that the Anglo team can learn a lot from how Latinos praise God, but sometimes there are cultural conflicts and not everyone will embrace this richness. How to help both communities integrate and create a ministry of spiritual richness and stay together, a challenge for my very important point of view. I think that's just a wonderful statement. And it reminds me of stories from the book of Acts. From the very beginning, the Christian gospel is being communicated from one culture to another, from the day of Pentecost, all those names of all those different cultures. And the gospel, when it's been proclaimed most richly, has always been in translation and on the move. And I think that this is going to be enriching for our diocese as we get started, because it'll force us to that place where we have to share across difference in a way that is not just us offering the gospel, it's us receiving the presence of Christ in a new way. We're getting to the end of our time. I want to make sure that we have time to talk about next steps. And I'll say a little bit about what I'm hoping will happen is that out of this call that some of us will feel called to form a learning community. And we will put together a cohort of teams from various congregations, and then invite Anthony and Al and some others from our national church to come and be with us for a couple days, when we could do a deep dive into what it would be like to do this work together in the Diocese of Oklahoma. Then form that learning community where we can innovate and experiment and try new things and give each other courage as we go forward. So everybody who's on this call or who signed up for this call is going to get invited, including you, Janie. And then you're also going to get a link to the zip codes, so you can see the zip code for your church. I've also put together a spreadsheet of census tracts for our churches and the Latino populations, both in our counties, in our census tracts for all of our congregations. So I'm happy to share that with you. So we're gonna have a gathering to launch this cohort, and then we're gonna be working together. So Anthony, would you say a little bit more about New Camino and what it includes? And would you also say something about the cultural competency course that I'll be in August?
Yes, thank you so much. So the New Camino is a 2-day introduction to Latino Hispanic ministry. It will include much more demographic information, stories about congregations that have reached out to Latinos, including stories from Anglo clergy who actually have a Spanish-speaking worshiping community within the church. Look at new models, have conversations, look at the use of social media and social and public events for evangelism. You'll hear a lot more from Al in terms of the generations, and opportunities to have conversations more than anything. So it's a 2-day event. Normally it begins on a Friday evening with dinner and ends around 2 or 3 in the afternoon on a Saturday. So Steve has expressed interest in doing that, offering that for the diocese. And then we not only have the event, but then we also create some cohorts so that we can continue to provide support to congregations and leaders that are interested in going further. Another resource that we offer is something called the Episcopal Latino Competency Course. We offer that in 2 formats. One was came about because of COVID, and that's what we call VELMC. It's the virtual Episcopal Latino Ministry Competency Course. It's a 5-day intensive course, and the next one is going to be held in May. That is 4.5-hour days with a 2-hour break in between that gives you a pretty comprehensive course. I think there's like 15 classes, 15 presentations that are offered during that week. And then we offer what we call VBE, a virtual Borderlands experience at a later date, which this year will be in November. And that's a 2-day course that gives you an introduction to the borderland issues and agencies that work with people on the border. We also have the actual Episcopal Latino Ministry competency course, which we refer to as ELMC. So VELMC and ELMC. The ELMC is the original course. That's an 8-day intensive that Steve and some others will be participating in. And the next one will be held in Sewanee and Atlanta. That's an 8-day course. So both of these all 3 of these courses, the virtual Borderlands experience, the VELMC course in May, and the ELMC course in August, provide opportunities to go much deeper with Latino Hispanic ministry. And I'll end by saying that we have 2 weeks left of what we're calling the Lenten virtual Borderlands experience. And I'll put in the chat in a minute, or I'll send that. Actually, I'll send you the links to all of these events that I'm mentioning to you. On Thursday nights, so in a couple days, we will have the virtual Borderlands experience. We have 2 more weeks. This coming week, we have 2 persons speaking to us about their ministry at the Hutto Detention Center in Texas. And the following week, we will end with the immigration lawyer at the Stewart Detention Center in Lumpkin, Georgia. And so both of those will be really fascinating presentations. And we invite you to that. Thank you, Steve.
Even more important, most importantly, is that Bishop Paulson is eager for us to get started and to participate in these programs and begin this learning cohort. So this is fully endorsed by our bishop, who's ready for us to get going. Lorenzo, would you say a little bit more about La Misa in English?
Absolutely. So that's the experiment where what we are trying to do is walk alongside with you as you are getting to know your neighbors, getting to figure out what would it look like for you to do an in-culture, not in-language service in English. And we walk alongside with you to do that. We have 1 spot left for a congregation where we will help you with the costs. The costs are limited to a little bit of Facebook advertising, which has worked well for us, and hiring of a musician. We encourage you to do it once a month so that you're not, and that you do it for at least a year with us. And like I said, we walk alongside with you so that you can do it well. We have a formula. There's 5-step formula on how to get started. Everything from the training to looking at the reports to having meetings with us. So you do not have to do. You don't necessarily have to do it with us where we pay. If you don't happen to end up being the 5th one of the congregations, you can still do it, and we'll walk alongside with you and help you sort of as consultants, if you will, on this. So and you can reach me through Ken and Steve. He will certainly share with you the reports based on zip codes. If you want more zip codes, we can certainly add around your church, but at least it will give you a good start to sort of see who is around you, and you can get a quick insight. So, and we're here to help. We're good people, Anthony, Al, I think that we're good people here to help. Think of us as resources, even if you're not part of one of our official programs. If you just want to drop us an email to be in conversation, or is like, hey, I bumped into this, can you help me out? What would you sort of do? Please, I'd be happy to.
To land that 5th spot in La Misa in English, what does the congregation need to be ready to do?
To start fairly quickly, because we're sort of moving. Some of our congregations begin April 7th with their, like I said, though, it's a monthly thing. So if you think you're ready and you think you have a team, this isn't meant to do more work for the clergy person of the congregation. But if you think you have a team already put in place, then you can just reach out to me, and we'll go ahead and reach and set up a time to talk, and we can go from there. I know that some of you in Oklahoma are are eager to do it. So yeah, you can, and like I said, you can either go through Steve. My email is very simple, lorenzo@tritank.org. Again, that's LORENZ. I'll type it in here. How about that? Aha, look at me. I can use technology.
Would you put the link to the Dropbox in there as well?
Yeah.
I will also have a link, and if I'll have slides for those of you who want to provide it, and a recording of this session available to everyone who signed up. So if you don't get a chance to write all this down, I'm going to be capturing as much of it as I can. So if your zip code isn't on there, it's because I didn't come in time for me to give it to Lorenzo, but I'll pass on so you get the report about your church. Make sure you get that. We'll find a time to do the new Camino here in this diocese. I'll be reaching out to some. I bet we have a couple of congregations that might be ready to go for La Misa in English. So talk to Lorenzo if you are ready, or if you want to talk with me a little bit about it, I'm happy to. So there's the Dropbox file. Everybody should click on that, and you can see if your zip code is in there. You can see that. You cut and paste it if you need to, and it will be in the email I send out tomorrow. Any further questions? We're coming in right at an hour and a half, so this is a fast-paced but really deep. I'm really thankful for all of the participation and the really strong response from our diocese, and especially thankful for our presenters, Canon Anthony Guillen, Father Lorenzo, Father Al, people that they truly are wonderful, kind, and a great resource for our church. And so I look forward to working together. And don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any further follow-up questions. And Father Keith, I see that if Zapopa isn't on there, we'll run one for you very soon. I'll give you the information. Why don't we end with prayer?
Yes.
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you that we meet you most when we are surprised, when we reach out and discover that you have been reaching out to us. We thank you for this work that we are being invited to begin to do. We ask for your grace and your presence with us as we step out. Give us courage. Help us be just a little uncomfortable so that we can grow and meet you in new and deeper ways. This we ask in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
God bless.